All right, let's talk about the great hands of stone Roberto Duran, who had a very very long career with insane accomplishments till near the end of it, and then decided to quit until he got in a car accident at the
Yeah.
age of, I think it was 55 or something
But
insane.
yeah, 54, 55. It was near his birthday. I know that much.
Yeah. So, Roy, what are your thoughts on Roberto Duran?
Okay, we're talking about a guy with, if I'm right, it's what, four, almost four generations, right? 4 decades.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, 4 decades. But I remember Roberto Duran as a kid. I used to go into the neighborhood stores that had them that sold the boxing books,
Mhm.
and I was always, because my brother hadn't even started boxing yet. George didn't start boxing until '67 in the Olympics in '68, of course. So I liked the sport of boxing, but I remember reading about Roberto Duran, and they called him the Hands of Stone. He's from Panama, right?
Mhm.
But what made me fascinated was he had this little goatee, right? Looks like the devil,
Yeah.
uh, and the way his hair was, and this guy, you know,
Wild.
yeah,
Like a caged animal
yes, indeed. And up
that
until
just
that point,
escaped, and he's
just,
pissed.
yeah, like I'll tear up the world.
Mhm.
And up until that point, probably the greatest, whatever two, but probably the greatest Latin fighter had been Jose Napoles, right? Who
Mhm.
was the welterweight champion, great fighter. And I think had beaten Curtis Coates for the title at that time. And that was from the welterweight. But Duran was the greatest little lightweight fighter that was knocking out. See, a lot of people, if you look at his record, he was actually knocking out guys at 145 and 160 early on. As you
Hmm.
always do when you're building up a fighter's record. Sometimes you just take a fight until you
Okay.
get to be a star. You just take a fight. You know, go, how much the guy weigh? He says, I'm, because back then the commission,
Especially if you're in poverty like he was.
yes, like he
Yeah.
was. He fought in the back. And my Dr. Dan Rios, and Roberto were great friends. They grew up. I mean, like
Hmm.
Dan became a doctor and one of the top what do they call it, oncologists.
Okay.
And he and Duran were very great, and to this day they still are. But Duran had this look that he wanted to take you apart. So I seen him in a fight, a highlight fight somewhere on. They used to show Saturday nights. They used to show like before a fight. It's this guy Roberto Duran, blah blah blah. You know the stuff that goes along with it rather. And they showed him knocking out like 3 or 4 guys in 3 weeks, not 3 months, in 3 weeks. Okay, because back then you could take a fight. I mean, fighters sometimes fought every 6 or 7 days, especially if they got knockouts. And this guy,
Mhm.
man, was like, and he was just steady knocking guys out. The greatest thing in Panama. Then he'd come into Miami and had a couple of fights. And then and Ken Buchanan was then the lightweight champion of the world from Scotland. Great little fighter himself, right? And you looked at the weigh-in. I remember, never forget that morning. You looked at the weigh-in. You saw Duran, who always had this thing of, I'll kill you. And honestly,
Mhm.
he said that. He would say that. I mean, that's what he would say, I'll kill you. You know,
That's what he felt.
that's what he felt.
Yeah.
And he knocked out Ken Buchanan with a shot. I mean, I had never seen a guy throw a punch like, oh my God. I thought the people thought Buchanan was dead.
That's understandable.
That's how hard the shot was.
Was it the one all I remember from that fight was the uppercuts. Was the finishing one the one that sent him through the ropes? Is that
sent him through the ropes? Yes.
Yeah.
And they had stopped the fight. You know, if you seen sometimes you see something, they said when it happens before they even reaction, everybody's like, that's it. That was it. That was going to be no more. Okay. And so
For me, it like that one was insane. Just the picture. If you look up the picture, he's like bent and it's not
yes,
even that he went
yes.
through the ropes. It's that it looks like Duran bent his body in an unnatural way into a right angle. And then Pernell Whitaker versus what's his name? The guy, he put him through the ropes too, but the ref didn't stop it. And Whitaker just hit him like 10 times as he's like leaning out the rope, just getting
leaning outside the rope.
yeah, just getting like worse and worse and worse. Those two will always just so brutal.
And Pernell didn't even have a killer. Well, he didn't possess it like this, but he didn't show it like that Duran did. But in Duran's case, he went on to have, you know, he still is to me. You look at Ike Williams, there's certain guys you look at lightweight and you say, boy, he was a great champion. But this guy he was the first fighter, and if I'm correct, in studying from the top 10, he beat everybody in the top 10.
Mm.
Everybody.
Just swept the division.
Swept the division. No, he moved up because there was no more competition for him. That was it. Nobody wanted to fight this guy. You know, really. I mean, basically, nah. But for the title, I don't want that.
I wouldn't want to fight him now.
You know, I'll wait till he die and then we'll take it.
Yeah, then we'll
see.
He
moved up. Yeah. He very well may have been, and no, I don't say may have been. He was to me the greatest lightweight champion ever.
It's hard to dispute that. It's very hard to dispute that.
And as he start to move up, you know, of course, it's like everything else. Bigger guys, you meet Ray. You know, he fought Ray.
That's what people forget, because he's so associated with the Four Kings kind of thing, or the Fab Four. They're sometimes called. You know, with Hearns and Sugar Ray and Hagler, that a lot of people forget that he was way older and he was way undersized.
Yes.
And the fact that he's people always like dispute, like, who's the best of the Four Kings, and people tend to put Duran at the bottom because he lost the most fights against the other three, not taking into account where he came from. Yeah.
Oh, hunger. I always use, and this is something that I use in comparing even today's fighters as well. But I always tell people the hungry fighter. That's why I like Manny Pacquiao so much, because I think
he goes for it.
Yes.
Every time. Yeah.
Every time. And I think in the fight game, more than anybody that I can identify with, probably when I use my brother as a comparison, right? From in boxing, is because Pacquiao came from like we were. I mean, he was a poor kid, poor kid, and he took it to the next level. Duran was a poor kid, you know, and Dr. Wilson would tell me stories sometime about how guys went for nickels and quarters. You know, the Americans would go over, they were building the Panama Canal at that time. So guys, they'd go down and see the Americans, and they put on these little shows and stuff for the quarters and whatever they would give them. But there was a hunger, and I've been back there to visit a number of times with them as well. There was a certain hunger that he had. And it started off, the hunger was to feed the hunger in your stomach. Okay, I got to eat, my family, my mother, my father, everybody has to eat. That hunger started, but that hunger went from the hunger of, I don't necessarily have to have, I'm eating good now, but now my hunger is to show that I'm the best fighter in the world.
Is there any other boxer who just, you could tell they love to fight? Yes. Even if Duran lost every single time, you know, even if that were the case, which obviously wasn't, he'd probably just want to keep doing it. Because it was when he was in there, it was his element. It was what he was born to do, and he loved every second of it.
We did a doubleheader one time, George and Duran did in Miami, Florida. It was against Dino Dennis. Jordan was fighting Dino Dennis, and I don't know, something nondescript. This was after he had lost the fight to Ray Leonard. And everybody was saying, well, you know, Duran, he quit. But people just, like you said, nobody looked at the fact this guy came like Manny Pacquiao. Well, Pacquiao came from 112, but he came from like 119, 125 pounds up to those weights. He was willing to put on the weight, and nobody took that. But I remember we got on that morning, we were weighing in, and he walks up to George and tells George, he says, Duran had just weighed in, the heavyweights, of course, were last. And that's what he said to George. He said, we killed him tonight. George looked at him like, huh? We kill him. You know, that mentality is not just, I want to show you I'm a good fighter. This is what we do. And early on in George's career, it was the same way. It's like, I want to destroy you, but I'm destroying you because my next move, if I win here, I go here. If I win, I go, the more I win, the higher up I go up the food chain, as you say, versus get bigger. And that's how you got there back then. You know, before the promoters start doing it for
messing around with everything.
Yeah, and that's the business of it. We'll get to, I'm sure. But Duran was that kind of guy, and as he moved up in weight, he never lost his tenacity, as well as, you know, even into the late period of his boxing career, what he did to Iran Barkley. He could have lost the fight. Everybody would just said, okay, he's another fighter.
Yeah, undersized. He just took out Hearns, so it makes sense.
Yes. So he's another fighter that stayed too long. But no, it wasn't good enough for him. I'm going to show you. And the hungerness.
Even after he got hurt bad, too, in the mid rounds.
Yeah, mid round got a tremendous right hand that Barkley hit him with. But the hunger that they have to show, that he had to show you that I belong here. This is what I like to do. And guess what? Win or lose, I'm going to be right here for it. I still can't explain the Sugar Ray Leonard fight. You know,
The second one, yeah.
Yeah, the second one, I still don't understand that. There's a lot of stories written about that. I knew a lot of guys that were
I don't
involved with
understand it either. I feel, I mean, we'll talk about it in depth at some point, but Duran was not losing badly enough.
No.
The most credible theory that I've heard, frankly, was indigestion. That's the only thing that makes sense to me, to where Duran goes, I'm not going to publicly say what's happening right now, but I need to leave very quickly because I dehydrated myself. I'm on all these diet pills, and then I had an entire steak this morning with, like, I forget what else he had. I think like a couple tubs of ice cream.
And he loved, well, could have been.
Yeah.
Listen, you know, who's to say? Listen, I tell you a secret. Duran loved black beans. The Cuban, he loved it. He could sit down. That was really his secret to losing his weight. He would go during training. There was a place in New York when he would come to New York, and I would see him there, and Norman Henry, who was the gentleman I was with at the time, and we would go, and that was his favorite place. The name I have to leave me right now. But he liked eating black beans while he was training because the beans gave him the energy and the protein that he needed, but they didn't stay on his stomach.
Really?
So to hear him say that he ate a steak that evening, it sounds crazy, knowing what his diet was. And and you're right, after he got through, he went straight to the ice cream shop. He loved junk food. But I have to believe, if he never mentioned he had eaten his black beans that day. But I know what he liked to eat during that time of training. So that was a possibility. I don't know. But he didn't, Ray wasn't hurting him. The fight could have still gone.
No, Ray was winning, but people in their heads try to make it seem like a blowout. If you go back and watch, I challenge anyone listening to go back and watch it. It wasn't a blowout.
No,
yeah,
by no means. And the way he threw his hands up, it wasn't like, a guy gets hit with a bunch of shots and be like, oh, whoa, that's enough. He was just like, you know what, because Ray was standing back. They're like, forget it.
Yeah.
I don't feel right and I'm gone. So,
and then Ray thought he was clowning because he hit him one more time.
Yes.
He's like, I think what he thought was Duran was saying, I don't care about you so much, I'm going to turn my back. So Ray's like, you have to take me seriously. But Duran was just done for whatever reason.
Done. Yeah. He's like, okay, forget it, I'm gone. And guys, I've been around a lot of boxing managers, old timers, and they would use the word like, he just did not throw a fight. I say to myself, the money that was at stake even back then, why would Roberto Duran have to throw a fight to get to the next level? You understand?
I doubt that they would have paid it out anyways, because betting. I don't bet myself, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't work like that. Like you bet that he's decision or knocked out. I doubt that was an option.
You got
that he quits.
Believe me, you got even listing. Like okay, on the ground. You got to make it look good because the boxing public is not stupid. So and knowing the kind of pride that Duran's have, I didn't see it happening. But I heard a ton of stories, at the time. But that's one of those things as it starts to go, as the years pass by, and you say, okay, Roberto Duran, the greatest lightweight champion of all time. This is my opinion, of course. Greatest lightweight champion of all time, one of the greatest fighters of all time, wins the title even later on in his career. Who would think that he would quit at any time in a boxing match? That became my opinion. And as I got to know him, I never even seen it or thought about it.
No, it's definitely weird. Going into a little bit of how he was in the ring, hyper aggressive, obviously, but also super, super smart. He could jab, he could move, he could stand sideways. But when I think Roberto Duran, I think coming in with an overhand right, grabbing a hold, and then just shanking with that left. That's what I like to think of Duran as grab and stab. Because it really does look like he's just got a knife and he's just going, finding like the tiniest little holes in their defense and manipulating them with it.
Well, again, I mentioned Ray Arcel because Ray Arcel was very close to him. His manager, I think he was, advisor for sure. So all the little tricks that Duran had, He had a way of grabbing, like you said, before he could grab that hand and lock that arm in right there and just shoot that thing, man. And on television to us, it might not look like a whole lot, but that guy land that thing into his guy's body into his ribs right here, about 3 or 4 shots, man.
Mm-hmm.
You're gladly to let it go. Let go. Referee was saying, let go, Roberto. You can hit a referee. Let go, Roberto. Roberto. Guy said, please, Roberto, let go. Make him. You start looking for the referee.
Yeah, he's not letting go.
Yeah.
It's like the 1-inch punch demonstration that Bruce Lee used to do, except of course it's hooks and uppercuts. And and then shoulder to shoulder he'd send, like, you wouldn't think he'd be able to get his hand through that little gap. But you'd see the guy's head just go, and you'd be like, why is his head doing that? Like you couldn't even see the shot. That's how tight it was.
If you watch the fight with Esteban de Jesus, right, and he more or less, that again, every fighter, people might not, you look at it differently. At least I have, and you might not consider that. People might say, oh, that wasn't his greatest victory. Maybe not, but it's everything that he did in that fight. Everything we just talked about. Mm-hmm. He jabbed. And Roberto had this thing of, he wasn't a very tall guy on top of it either, even for for a lightweight. But he could be right here and be right here before you knew it.
Yeah.
And every time he moved, he reacted. The whole idea is that you have to learn to react to a fighter's punch. I throw a right hand, I got to do something else, especially if I'm close enough for you to do it. So he had that, and that's why he beat Ray Leonard in that first fight. People can say a lot of Ray Leonard had his fans as well, but he beat Ray Leonard in that first fight. Ray had never been in a ring with anybody like him. I don't think
who could do anything like that for sure.
I don't think he ever met anybody else like that.
A while when we were talking about Hagler, you mentioned John Jones for switch hitting, but what's funny is that John Jones started this, and then a lot of people are doing it now. Are using a lot of the same tactics that Duran used against the ropes when they have someone against the ropes. They're using that up against the cage. They'll get that underhook, and then they'll unbalance the person, and then that creates so many openings. Because if your guard's here, or if you've got a clinch, but then once you start to lean a little bit, not only do you need to worry more about takedowns, obviously, the guy could suddenly shoot on you and pull you down, but you're also creating those vulnerabilities. And I have a video where I do like a comparison side to side, just briefly. And it's exact. I doubt Jones, maybe he did. I doubt John Jones watched Duran. He has a wrestling background, and he probably figured it out from the wrestling background. But man, they use a lot of the same tactics and tricks, and it's fascinating. That's dominating the UFC right now.
It's so many because those guys, in comparison, I think they're both. I think the thing that probably differs the modern martial artist fighters. I'm not talking about the guys like Ken Shamrock and even Ortiz back in the early days. Not so much of those guys. Is that the modern guys' situation in MMA is a little bit different because a lot of these guys, as you said, have wrestling backgrounds, but they also have education backgrounds. So the early fighters, they didn't have that. We talk about what they had to have, but there was a hunger, and maybe the hunger is still there. The MMA fighters. Most of the time you hear about the MMA fight, I'm hearing about a guy. He went to California, David. He played football here. I mean, his life just wasn't the same as it was for a guy that had to basically grew up in the streets, and that's what I like. But the comparison is almost, it's not that much different in some. It's just that you can kick a guy if you have to. In boxing, you may want to kick a guy, especially
yeah. They don't let you. No.
Yeah, but when you look at a guy like Duran, and because he had a great teacher in him and a great trainer, Panama Lewis was in there with it, but Panama was like he was the Boondini Brown in Duran's corner. Hey, go champion, do this, but I don't think he ever told him
just cheerleader.
Yeah, give me that bottle. No, I want that bottle right there. I mean, those are the things that. But because he had one of the greatest teachers in the game, who taught Roberto from I think Roberto was like 10 years old. He used to fight grown men. When I say grown men, 17, 18-year-old guys. So when he was a kid, the hunger.
Poverty from other countries is a whole different element than poverty. Like I grew up with my family on welfare, but we always had enough to eat. We were never going to potentially starve to death if we didn't go down and pick up trash.
Yes.
We didn't need to find some way out of there. So when someone finds a way out of there through fighting, and they enjoy it, if they just keep getting beat up, then that's just really sad. Obviously,
that's a different ground thing.
Yeah. That's a whole different thing. But if they enjoy it, if they find their passion, and their passion allows them to progress in life, and then buy their parents a house or something like that, that's a whole different story right there.
Hey, I'm the American dream. I'm a process. I'm part of that American dream, man.
Man.
Because I know what it's like. We ate, like you said, we ate, not a lot, but we had a little. Those guys have nothing. And if you visit those countries, I've been over there. I've seen it. I've seen people think they show the commercials, but they think it's just a commercial that you see a kid standing out over water, running down and trying to reach out and get. It happens. You wouldn't think with all the billionaires in this world, multi-billionaires in this world. But it's there. If boxing gives you, and I think that's what has made boxing, and I know we're going to get to this business of it, but that's what has made boxing this global sport. When guys like Triple G, who has arisen, even before the Klitschko brothers, and they weren't poor guys. Don't get me wrong, by no stretch of me if I read the history right. But still, you look at the guys like Triple G, the Canelos, the guys the Julio Chavez's, guys who come from these so-called third world nations.
Anyone could do it. It's not like the stories you hear about, like, oh, they're a famous actor now, and then if you research, it turns out, oh, okay, yeah, their cousin was a famous director. It's nothing like that. It's like
that, man.
Yeah.
It's like guys said. I remember we were in, what was the fighter name? The guy was fighting Tapia some years back. Anyway, the guy was talking, and they was asking him about what got him into boxing. He says, and through his interpreter, he says, my family had very little to eat, very little clothes to wear, right? He said, but when I found out I could use these to make money for my family, a guy came and got him. I wish I could think of this fighter's name. And he said, that was all it took. He said, from that point on, I knew I had to win every time I go out. He said the guy would give him a couple of $100 for winning. Then they give him $500. Then the guy then started getting. He said he had never counted to $1,000. The name's going to come to me in a minute. It was a Hispanic fighter, Latino, and I don't know what's politically correct these days, so I try to say Hispanic, Latino, Mexican, whatever he was a foreign fighter.
It'll change in 10 years, and then you'll be in trouble.
Of course.
Don't worry about it.
They'll tell us we can't use this podcast anymore because we said it wrong.
We said Hispanic 10 years ago. Yeah.
Right. So this guy used his. He said to use these and make money.
The tools you're born with,
the tools you were born with. That's what the hunger, and I think that's what has hurt the American fighter over the last 10 or 12 years.
Okay, the last thing we have to talk about, Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. Mike Tyson versus.
We're leaving the stage. We're gonna do a Henny Youngman say, we're leaving the stage. I gotta leave you with a good one.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. I just leave the podcast, and then you're just.
I got a million of them.
Oh God, straight up. My hope is that they put on a show, and it really is an exhibition, and they just pull off some good moves, and they hit each other light, and then everyone goes home happy. I don't think that's going to happen because these are two of the most competitive people on the planet. And Tyson has grown a lot as a person, obviously, and he's perhaps more zen, whatever you'd want to call it. The ego isn't there, but I think in his heart of hearts, he's a champion and he likes to fight. And people who say that, he lacked that as a champion. He lacked adjustments, I think, more than anything. There were times when later in his career where it looked like his heart wasn't in the entire fight. Not just, he was getting beat and then he gave up. It looked more to me like, I don't want to be a boxer anymore. But which Tyson is going to show up is the question for me. Is it going to be the one who is adamant about proving his legacy? And that's his motivation. Is it going to be new, playful, going to show off a little bit Tyson? That's my question, but I kind of think I already know which Roy Jones Jr. is going to show up, which is the one that always shows up, which is I'm here to take your fucking to take your name and put it on my record, and I'll have fun doing it, but I'm going to try my hardest.
The way I see this is this, okay? And since they all announced it, they've said that, of course, there's no judge. It's just an exhibition.
Mm-hmm.
So the only way to fight, and there's a betting odds on this thing. That's what I can't believe. I think it's like 250 to 175, right? So there's odds on it. So that lets you know, kind of, that somebody wants to win.
Yeah.
Roy Jones hasn't fought in 5 years. Tyson had literally fought in about 17, maybe 15, 16, 17. I forget the last fight was what, 2004, 5 or something neighborhood. But it's been a while since he's fought.
Yeah.
Ring rust, I don't care how he sparred. Ring rust has to be there. I haven't seen him do it. I've seen him hit the pass. They shoot a little quick thing in the bag and pass like that. Roy Jones has been about 5 years, okay? I think, and Roy trains and works with fighters all day. He has fighters that he works with all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think his accuracy would be a lot better.
Yeah.
And I think that for the first 2 rounds, if Tyson, and they're going to be using either 12 or 18 ounce gloves, I'm not sure, which most states require exhibitions use 12 to 18 ounce gloves.
That's great. That's good news, actually.
Yeah, it's in California, I think, as a matter of fact. There's some Greater Health Park or someplace up in California.
Mm.
So chances are we may get out there for that, hopefully. There won't be a crowd, but, they're going to let certain people come in. But I see two or 3 rounds of guys putting on a show.
Yeah.
If somebody gets tagged with a shot, that fight's going to end. That exhibition is going to end in 3 rounds.
It's going to be a fight.
And
yeah.
It's going to be a fight. If nothing like that happens in the first 3 rounds, expect the rest to be an 8-round dancing gig with 2 50-year-old guys just deciding, let's do this waltz to the end, make our money, and we live to go home. Because I don't think that Roy has that snap power in his punches to hurt Mike.
Mm-hmm.
At 50 years old, the power was the last thing to go, they say, right?
Yeah.
So at 50 years old, can Tyson still pop? Oh, yes, he can.
Yeah, Roy relied on speed and the name of this podcast, which is No One Saw the Punch Coming. But I don't think he has, unless they get serious and then Roy starts piling on a bunch of punches and catches Mike with something he didn't see first. Like he catches him with an uppercut as he ducks down and then tries to go for the finish. Then I don't see a knockout from Jones. But
I've watched Roy spar, David. I've watched him spar with fighters in the last few years with the fighters he's worked with. Roy had the same technique here, right? You don't just drop that. Because with Tarver, just about a little bit, caught with a shot. Bam. Glenn Brown, same thing. Missed timing, caught with a shot. It's good night, Dick, right? If it happened with Tyson, and if he's playing like this, his hands, and Tyson sees it, I just think that Mike Tyson has to try to prove, of anybody, Mike is the one that has to prove something to somebody. The good thing about it, I don't think Tyson will bite him at all. You don't have to worry about that. But everybody says that because Tyson likes to smoke the weed, they worry about it. And he had a problem, as you well know, he's taking medication at one time. So you have to wonder, how does that do with the breathing function of it? But I do believe this, that Mike Tyson and Roy Jones both would not even attempt to put themselves on a stage like this unless they both thought that they had it to do it. The old thing is, old generals, they never retire. They just look for another war to go to. And that's what they do. And I think that's what we're going to see that particular night. 3 rounds of good fighting. And if it goes the rest, you'll see 5 rounds where the rest will be at that. Kind of like Mayweather and Pacquiao. 2 guys who say, hey, man, how much did we make? How much? Every time you go back to the corner, say, how much you made? 100 million? 100 million? Oh, okay. Don't, I'm not going to hurt you. You don't have to hurt me. That's what I think we're going to get. I may be wrong, but, and I hope I am. For the sake of it, my wife is always trying to prove me right or wrong about something anyway. And I hope about this, I'm wrong altogether.
I hope so too. I hope it's a good performance. If you've ever seen the exhibition of Robinson versus Pep, it's almost too much for a performance. You wish that they kind of sparred light a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah. So I'm hoping for something like that. Both these guys don't need to be doing this right now, obviously, but just there's something telling me that I think just because I've spent so long studying both fighters that personality-wise, I think there's a potential, like you said, for this to get serious. What might happen, which would be pretty funny, but also kind of sad at the same time, is they get serious, and then neither man has the conditioning to keep it serious. Yeah,
that's
to keep
what
it
I'm
serious.
talking about. That's exactly what I mean. After 3 rounds, the juice may be gone. It's like, oh God, I can't. Now that's what I mean. You just got to dance. I don't. Roy Jones for about 10 years was the best fighter from 160 to 175.
Unbelievably good.
Unbelievable. Maybe up to heavyweight because the guy won the heavyweight championship of the world. So, but still, 10 years. When you look at dominance, you have to go in weight division. Roy Jones, Marvin Hagler, Larry Holmes. I'm going back in the period over these periods of time, right? But you have to look at the 3 guys that dominated for so long. We never know what Ali would have done. He lost a lot of years being out of the ring, so we don't know how long would he been. Would he been champion forever? I mean, for 10 years, maybe. Who knows? Certain guys, if George doesn't lose to Ali, does he go on? Because he beats everybody else from that point on. He had beaten Norton for all the rest. Does he go on for 10 years? But when you start looking at dominance, that's what you kind of have to look at. So we're looking at 2 guys that at one time, and maybe at the same time, and if you look at it, were the most domineering fighters in the game.
No, this is bringing it back to the 90s big time.
Yeah. So are we going to get that? I don't know. I know it all of a sudden makes George coming back in the ring at 36 years old looks like nothing, right?
Yeah. I mean, thankfully these guys aren't trying to fight the top 10 guys right now.
Yeah.
If they're going to fight anybody, why not let them fight each other and have some fun with it?
And have some fun.
But what if it becomes one of the best fights of all time and is serious? Could you imagine? Could you imagine if both guys get in there and somehow their conditioning is far beyond what people expect and is back and forth, and you get to see Roy Jones Jr. and Mike Tyson almost as if they're close to something like their prime would be because they're against each other? What if it's an amazing fight?
That'd be terrible for boxing.
Really?
Yeah, because
I think it'd be terrible for them.
you're gonna see all the other guys. Oscar's already talked about doing it.
Oh God!
I mean, what's next? What's next? Is Uma Nelson said, "Hey, I want to come back and try it again." I mean, people said when George won the title at 45, it would never happen again. Who knows? It's one of those kind of things. But I'm gonna look around ringside that night, and there's 2 things I'm going to be looking for around the ring. You know what that is, David?
What?
Chiropractor and an air machine. And the cardiologist sitting over in the corner over there. Oh. Then that way we're gonna know.
Of course, and then after the fight, the Viagra bottle.
Yeah, right.
Because you got to celebrate. You just made an insane amount of money, whether you won or lost.
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Yes, you have. But he has his fans. Roy has his fans, and they're gonna support him. Hey, so be it.
Getting into the technique element of this, let's do this. Okay. They both fight in their prime. Let's do that. I think that's the most useful. I think if Roy Jones Jr. fights a perfect, flawless fight with both of them in their primes, maybe Mike gets knocked down once or twice, but I don't see him getting knocked out. But Jones could win. If Tyson catches him once with a good shot, I don't see Jones getting out of it. What do you think?
This is my scenario. Bob Foster, Joe Frazier. Frazier catches him with one shot. Foster tried to take Frazier out, but Joe caught him with one shot. He rolled over like a doodle bug. That was it. He curled over. That was the end of that fight. That was it. Now, if Foster probably goes out and tries not to take Joe's head off, maybe that fight goes a little bit longer. And just maybe Foster could eke out a decision because Bob was lighter, could move. Joe was aggressive, so you know what you're going to get from Joe. So Foster probably would have had a chance to use his stuff because he went 6 or 7 rounds, I think, with Muhammad. So he may have got a chance to use his stuff. With this fight, when they're younger, I think it's the same scenario. Because you saw what Tyson did to Spinks.
Yeah.
one pop to the mouth, to the gut, and it's over with.
Mm-hmm.
Roy Jones, a better athlete and probably stronger than what Michael Spinks was at that weight, and if they both fought at a heavyweight. We saw how Roy Jones reacted with John Ruiz. Ruiz tried to do it. He tried to manhandle him and do everything, but Roy's legs were so good that night. His timing, his rhythm was everything that the fighter could want. If he could drag Mike Tyson into a 10, 12 round decision, I think Roy had a chance to win a fight like that too. I don't think he goes, especially during that time. I don't think he goes down. And I think the possibility exists. Lewis and Khan, you know, it's one of those kind of things. It's always a punch or two. It's always, though, again, it's always the punch that you didn't see that ends a fight like that.